we're going to talk about simplifying rational expressions. First, let's talk about rational numbers. What are rational numbers? For example, 2/3, -1/2. These two are rational numbers. Rational numbers are numbers that could be written as integer over integer, providing that the denominator does not equal 0. Rational expressions. Here are some examples of rational expressions. Rational expressions are polynomial divided by polynomial, providing that the denominator does not equal 0. Rational functions. Here are two examples of rational functions. A rational function is a function whose equation is defined by a rational expression in one variable, where the denominator is never 0. Today, we're going to focus on simplifying rational expressions. Look at this first example. 8yz⁴ divided by 6y² z to the second power. This is a rational expression because 8yz⁴ is a polynomial in y and z, and also the denominator is also a polynomial in y and z. So it is a rational expression. Consider the vectors 8 and 6. They have common factor 2. So we're going to divide out 2 up and down, and we get 4 on top and 3 down here. Now for the y, we have y and y². The common factor will be y. So divide by y up and down, we get 1 on top and y down here. Now for z⁴, z², the greatest common factor will be z². So we're going to divide by z² up and down. So z⁴ divided by z² will be z². z² divided by z² will be 1. Now we can rewrite this. So the simplified version of this expression will become 4z² in the numerator and 3y in the denominator. Notice that when we simplify rational expression, like in this example, over here, the 3 here is a factor of the numerator because you see this is multiplication between this factor and this factor, and also multiplication between this factor and this factor. Factors are separate by multiplication. So the 3 here is a common factor up and down. We can cancel them out. Now in the second case over here, this is addition and this is subtraction. Those are not multiplication. When it's not multiplication, the 3 here is not a factor. Factors are separate by multiplication. So this 3 here and this 3 here, they are not common factor up and down. We cannot cancel or divide them out. Now look at this second example over here. In this rational expression, we cannot divide out the 6 and the 3 or the 6 and the 9 yet. Because you see here, this is subtraction. It is not multiplication. So 3 is not a factor. In order to divide out common factor, we must factor the numerator and the denominator, and put them in factored form. The numerator. Notice the numerator 6x squared is already in a factor form. It is a product of 6 and x squared. So in between is multiplication. So we can just copy that, carry that over. Now the denominator is not factored because in between this is not multiplication. So to factor this, remember the first step in factoring is to take out the greatest common factor. The greatest common factor of these two terms will be 6x to the third power. After we take out this greatest common factor, we left with x minus 3 in the parenthesis. So this 3x cubed times x give you 3x to the 4. Negative 3 times 3x cubed give you negative 9x cubed here. Now, you see that this is factor form. Now the denominator is in factor form. We can divide our common factor up and down. So the 6x squared and this one, the common factor here, let's take a look. 6 divided by 3 is 2. Now what about this x squared and x cubed? They have common factor x squared. So we're going to divide x squared up and down. Divide up here by x squared, we get 1. Divide down here, x cubed divided by x squared, then you get x. Now finally, we will write this. So the numerator, we have 2 times 1, we get 2. The denominator, we get x times the quantity of x minus 3. And that's the final answer over here. Do not multiply this x inside. We would like to keep this in a factor form, so it is clear that we don't have any more common factor to divide out up and down. So leave it in a factor form this way. Now, the next example, x squared minus 16. This quantity divided by 2x squared plus 8x. First, notice that up here, this is subtraction, and here's addition. So x squared and this negative 16, they are not factors. Factors have to be separated by multiplication only. So in order to divide our common factor up and down, we need to factor the numerator and the denominator. Notice that the numerator on top, it is a difference of 2 squared, x squared minus 4 squared. So that will factor into x minus 4 times x plus 4. Now, for the denominator over here, the first step in factoring is to take out the greatest common factor. So we're going to take out the greatest common factor here, which is 2x. Now, to figure out what to put in the parentheses, you can use division. 2x squared divided by 2x, we get x. And then plus 8x divided by 4x, we get 4. Now notice that over here is multiplication and multiplication. So this x plus 4 is a common factor up and down. We can divide them out. Now after we divide out the common factor x plus 4 up and down, we left with x minus 4 over 2x. Notice that this is subtraction between these two. So the x here is not a factor. This x and this x cannot be divided out. Next example, x squared minus 10x plus 25. This quantity divided by 8x minus 40. To prepare to simplify, we first recognize that the numerator up here, it is a perfect square trinomial. So we can factor that into x minus 5 perfect square. Or you can write this as x minus 5 times x minus 5 using the try and error method. Now you might wonder, how can I recognize that this is a perfect square? So let's do a quick review here. Now we call that a squared minus 2ab plus b squared is the perfect square of a minus b. X squared minus 10x plus 25. I first recognize that this one here is the square of x. And then I recognize that the last thing over here, it is the square of 5. And then let's check the middle. So, and see if we multiply, see if we use 2 times the base for this and times the base for this, do we get back to this? So let's check that out. 2 times x times 5, indeed it is equal to 10x over here. So this is going to match with this formula over here. This is like the a squared minus 2ab plus b squared. So we can write this as the perfect square of x, and here's 5. In between, remember, when this is minus, then this will be minus between these two. So this is the perfect square of x minus 5. Now, if you don't recognize that as a perfect square, you can also use try and error to factor this. The way that we do it is this. So the x squared is going to factor into x times x. You think about two numbers that multiply to get 25 and sum up to negative 10. So the two numbers will be negative 5, negative 5. Negative 5 times negative 5 is positive 25. Negative 5 adding negative 5 is negative 10. So we factor into x minus 5 times x minus 5. When the two factors are the same, we unite them together and write it as a perfect square, like this. The denominator, we can also factor it. The first step in factoring is to take out the greatest common factor. So I'm going to take out 8. The common factor GCF over here is 8. Take out 8, we have x minus 5 in the parenthesis. Now x minus 5 square divided by x minus 5, we have x minus 5 in the numerator. So finally, we can write this as x minus 5 in the numerator divided by 8 in the denominator. Notice that when we divide out common factor, say 5 over 5, we get 1. A over A, divide out the common factor A. When A is not 0, A divided by A will be 1. Also, when we divide out the common factor x minus 5, that will become 1. What happens if the factors up and down are opposite? Say, up here we have negative 5, down here we have 5. Negative 5 divided by 5, we get negative 1. And A divided by negative A, when these two are opposite, A does not equal 0, we also get negative 1. And this one, negative parenthesis, or think about that as opposite of x minus 5 divided by x minus 5. What happened over here is this x minus 5 divide out, and we also get the result to be -1. So when we divide our factors that are opposite, we will get -1. Notice that opposite of the quantity of x minus 5, if we distribute the negative sign inside, this becomes -x. Negative times negative here is positive, so become +5. Now we can rearrange the term as long as we take the sign in front of it with us. So we can put the +5 in front, minus x in the back. So this is equivalent to 5 minus x. Now we recognize that 5 minus x is the same as opposite of x minus 5. This, we can rewrite that as 5 minus x over x minus 5. And when we simplify this, we'll get -1 also, because these two factors are opposite. 5 minus x and x minus 5 are opposite factors of each other. So when we divide them out, we will get -1. Before we move on, let's do some practice to recognize opposite. The opposite of 2, it is -2. Opposite of -7, it is +7. Now, what about opposite of 2 minus 7? Well, we recognize that 2 minus 7 over here is -5. Opposite of -5 should be 5. Now, let's think about another way. You can take opposite by taking opposite of each term. Opposite of 2 is -2. Opposite of -7 is +7. So opposite of 2 minus 7 is 7 minus 2. As you can check here, 7 minus 2 is equal to 5. So to take opposite, you can take opposite of each term in the expression to get opposite. Now similarly, opposite of A is -A. Opposite of -B here is +B. Opposite A minus B here, it is. Now let's take it this way. Opposite of A is -A. Opposite of -B is +B. So A minus B and B minus A are opposite. Just like 2 minus 7 and 7 minus 2, they are opposite. Now, when we divide our opposite factor, say A minus B divided by B minus A, since they are opposite, so this one and this one, they are opposite factors. When we divide our opposite, the result we get will be equal to -1. So remember, divide our opposite factor, we'll get -1. Now we're going to do some example to simplify rational expressions by dividing our opposite factor. We have 3x squared minus 10xy minus 8y squared. This quantity divided by 4y squared minus xy. We'll begin by factoring the numerator and the denominator so we can cancel our common factor later on. Notice that the numerator over here, when we factor this, there's no greatest common factor, and this one has 3 terms, and it's in the form of x squared, xy, y squared. So we use try and error method to factor this. So for the 3 here, we can try 3 times 1. For this -8 here, we can try 2 times 4, but we need to put the negative sign somewhere. So how about we put the negative sign? We'll put the negative sign here. So we know that 3 times 1 gives you 3, -4 times 2 gives you -8. So that the first and the last term will match. However, we also want the middle coefficient match. So we're going to cross multiply it. 3 times 2 makes 6. 1 times -4 makes -4. When we sum this up, we get 2, which is not the same as the coefficient in the middle term. So we have to adjust this. So this time, let's try 3 times 1 for this. And for the -8 here, I'm going to switch this 2. So I'm going to have 2 on top, -4 down here. So by switching this 2. So 3 times 1 still give you 3. 2 times -4 still give you -8. Now cross multiply it. Remember when you cross multiply and add, that actually corresponds to adding the inner and outer product. 3 times -4 here is -12. 1 times 2 here makes 2. The sum of these two is -10, which match with this -10, the coefficient of the middle term. So I know I got the right combination. So after this, we're going to put the variable back. So this stands for 3x plus 2y. So we have 3x plus 2y for the first vector. And then the second vector over here will be 1x minus 4y, which is the same as x minus 4y. Now we're done factoring the numerator. For the denominator, we take out the GCF, which is y. Take out common factor y, we left with 4y here minus x. Now notice that I have factored the denominator and also the numerator. So they are in factored form. Now notice that, do we have a common factor we can divide out up and down? Well, these two, they look kind of related, right? Notice that this is x minus 4y, this is 4y minus x. Just like a minus b divided by b minus a, they are opposite factors. X minus 4y and 4y minus x are opposite factors. You can think it this way. X and -x are opposite. -4y and 4y are opposite. So every term in this expression is going to be opposite of the corresponding term here in this expression. So they're opposite. Okay. So when we divide our opposite, we'll get -1. So divide them out, I will get -1. Usually put the -1 in the numerator on top. So that is going to become -1 times this. Let's keep the negative sign outside. So it's negative, and then parenthesis, 3x plus 2y. In the denominator, we're left with y. Notice that this y and this y cannot be divided out because this is addition. So this y here is not a factor of the numerator. So you cannot divide out the y and the y here.